So as we were just discussing with the mayor, uncommitted, really outperforming expectations, sending a message to the Biden White House about their unconditional support for Israel. And we have some pretty important updates here, so put this up on the screen. Looks like uncommitted has actually won a couple of delegates to the Democratic convention. They would be sort of unobligated, not obligated to any particular candidate, but, you know, especially if the uncommitted movement continues forward and continues to potentially grow, you could have some number, in addition to these two, of additional delegates going to the Democratic National Convention who have been sent there from a group of Democratic-based voters who are disgusted with the Biden policy vis-a-vis Israel. So this could end up being significant. It's certainly a huge win for this movement, which, you know, just started a few weeks ago, shoestring budget, everything going against them, and yet was able to get over 100,000 Michigan Democrats to come out and vote explicitly against this president's policy. Saagar, one thing that's noteworthy that they talk about in that report, Super Tuesday is coming up next week on Tuesday, and 8 of the states that are voting on Super Tuesday have something akin to uncommitted. A lot of the attention, as I'll discuss in a little bit, is going to Minnesota, both because it is also a swing state and also because it has a significant Muslim population. But as the mayor was just explaining, I mean, yes, the support for uncommitted was highest among Arab Americans in Michigan, highest among Muslim Americans, but really cut across a lot of different demographic groups. So I don't even think you need, you know, the specific demographics that you had in Michigan for uncommitted or its equivalent to have a significant impact in these other states.
A couple places I'm really going to look out for in terms of the ballot. Like you said, there are several states, but I really want to see his performance in some of the more critical places where you could see signs of popular vote, like California or Colorado, where you traditionally will have Democrats that come out in force, and it drives up the overall popular vote. It's a good view sometimes in the primary of overall enthusiasm. Same thing at the same time, you want to look in some of the red states, not only at the Republican Party, but in terms of Democratic overperformance there, in terms of what that might look like in the same thing. It's always a sign of like how enthusiastic everybody really is, like Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and some of these places. So uncommitted, but overall the number two, like how much of Biden is able to really run the table? Are any of these third-party candidates, others uncommitted? Some of his primary challengers, Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson, who I believe is now back in the race. Like, well, how's that going to fare as well? So, I don't think we're going to see as strong of a Biden as a lot of people are thinking.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to that. It was interesting in that article about how they got the couple of delegates and talking about what happens going forward. You got a quote from Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who's a Democrat. He said he expected a measure of Minnesota's Somali population, the largest in the country, to vote uncommitted in his state's Democratic primary on Super Tuesday. More than 86,000 Somalis live in Minnesota. Walz, of course, is a major supporter of Biden's re-election campaign. He said Michigan's uncommitted results were a healthy demonstration of democracy. And that sort of echoes the line that Biden took, the line that Gretchen Whitmer took. The politicians are very much trying to say they don't want to piss these people off even more than they're already pissed off. So they're like, this is just great democracy. Thanks for coming out. However, over on the cable news networks, their apparatchiks were a little more aggressive in dismissing this vote, trying to undercut it, and basically coping in whatever ways they possibly could. Case in point, you had Claire McCaskill, former senator and now just all-around Democratic hack and corrupt former official. She came out to say, you know what, those uncommitted areas, they never really liked Joe Biden anyway, so this really is no big deal. Let's listen to her cope on election night.
But also, Chris, we have to remember, I mean, let's look at the Ann Arbor numbers. Joe Biden didn't win Ann Arbor. Bernie Sanders won Ann Arbor.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So some of these areas have never been Biden country. They have been really many more people that were further left and didn't like the idea of a moderate carrying the flag of our party.
If you're the elites of the Democratic Party, if you're the Biden White House, how concerned are you really about this faction of uncommitted voters staying home in November?
Well, I think there's a danger on both sides here that people are going to stay home. I think you've got traditional Republicans that no way they will vote for Joe Biden, and no way they will vote for Donald Trump. So there's going to be some people that are going to hold their nose and vote, and then there's going to be people that just stay home. The question is, will the Biden campaign be able, And by the way, there are no elites in our party, Alice.
Yes, sorry.
No elites.
Term doesn't exist, actually.
I know you didn't mean that.
That doesn't exist.
But the question is, can Biden draw the kind of contrast around some issues like guns and abortion and, frankly, autocracy and what Trump is saying he's going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to tear up
Dictator on day one.
Dictator on day one.
You got a lot going on there. So first of all, I just have to comment on, there's no elites within the Democratic Party. Says a woman who's like a multi-millionaire. So there's that one. But, you see some of the typical, sort of explanations of how this is really no big deal for Biden, exemplified there by Claire McCaskill. In particular, it's basically like, but Trump. Once they remember, this will be in the past. They'll think about Trump. They'll think about abortion. And there's no, the policy is going to change. It's just we think that people will get over it. And by the way, we think we could win some of Nikki Haley's Republican supporters more easily at this point, really, is what she's saying, than these protest voters who are upset over our government funding a genocide. But I really love how she's so dismissive of these parts of Michigan, when, again, the highest numbers came in college towns and in majority Arab American and Muslim American places like Dearborn. But you had a pretty significant vote across the entire state that you cannot just hand wave away and dismiss as like, those crazy Bernie Sanders supporters. Not to mention, those crazy Bernie Sanders supporters were a vital part of your 2020 election victory. They are also Democrats that you need to show up in order to succeed. So I really enjoyed all of that. And I especially loved the host grabbing on, you're right. That's a great point. Grabbing onto whatever straws they could to try to dismiss the significance of what was incredibly significant.
There are no elites in the Democratic Party is one of the most insane things that I've ever heard. But the thing is, though, is that the actual elites in the Democratic Party do at least see some signs of panic. Here's Morning Joe, for example. Let's take a listen.
Governor Whitmer, when we had her on the show earlier this week, acknowledged that for some in the Muslim American, Arab American community in Michigan, this issue is so personal that even she anticipated that in November, because they're so angry, they won't want to cast their ballot for Joe Biden. They're not going to vote for Trump, but they might find a third-party candidate, or they might just choose to stay home. So this is something the re-election team is going to have to deal with, and also try to find some other paths to victory in that state.
Well, I mean, they need to be worried about it. They obviously need to be concerned about it. They also, though, need to service these voters and stay in front of these voters between now and then. It's 8-9 months, a very long time in politics, a lifetime in politics.
Wow. Lifetime in politics. But, at the very least, I think it's one of those where, Krystal, they are acknowledging that things aren't necessarily good for the Democratic Party, where, look, because that's Biden's show, he does have to listen now at some point. So I'm not quite sure how much has gone through. My likely analysis kind of the way they look at it is, in the way that they do almost every setback, is it'll be fine because of Trump. They really believe it. I don't think it's going to work, but that's what they believe at the White House. Well,
what was interesting to me watching the election night results, and I delightedly watched CNN all night to see the way that they would cope and seethe over all of this. But the result would have been less significant if you didn't have the mainstream organs like MSNBC and CNN really paying attention to it and really covering it, really hand-wringing over it. Now, there's this phenomenon that happens, and this is classic sort of timeline of the COPE, where when the initial shock hits, they can't help but be a little bit honest about this is a problem. And that's what was going on CNN that night. But even a few hours into the coverage, they already were bringing on analysts to be like, this is fine. It's no big deal. This is barely even more votes than uncommitted even usually gets, which is just a complete lie and fabrication, by the way. But they had already moved on to trying to dismiss it and trying to pretend like this is no big deal. But listen, the bottom line is, whatever you think about what Israel's doing, a majority of Democrats think it's a genocide. A majority of Democrats think it's a genocide. 30% more are not sure. So yes, that is going to have some electoral consequences when the Democratic president is shipping the weapons to be used in what a majority of the Democratic base thinks is a genocide. I mean, that is pretty much as basic as it comes. So even if you have come up with whatever COPE math you've imagined to dismiss the 100,000 people in Michigan as it's really no big deal and we're going to be fine, et cetera, that basic reality is not going anywhere. And, you know, it is certainly possible. Listen, it's possible Michigan is the high watermark for uncommitted because of the demographic nature there, because it was, you know, going alone. And so there was a lot of focus and they had a little bit of time to prepare. You had Rashida Tlaib there. Yep. You had other local electeds who decided to get behind the movement. And, you know, former Congressman Levin also getting behind the movement. Could be that's the high watermark. Could be that this thing continues to grow and you continue to see some results like this in additional Super Tuesday states and beyond. We have one more for you, which is just so amazing, over on CNN, talking about the youths and what Biden, all the great work Biden has been doing to reach out to the youth. So what do they even want from him anyway? This, guys, is the sixth element in the block. Let's take a look.
But it was also the college counties, like around Ann Arbor, that you had high numbers of people voting uncommitted. What can President Biden do in terms of outreach to younger voters that he hasn't done already? I mean, he's already forgiven all the student debt that he can. He's already showing up on Seth Meyers and TikTok. How does he reach the younger crowd?
He's already on TikTok.
He's already done a single TikTok, and he went on Seth Meyers. Don't they, young people love Seth Meyers? The student debt thing is also bullshit because obviously they could do a lot more on student debt, but he's doing this, you know, little piddly efforts, which I do appreciate is better than nothing. But yeah, I love how they're just so exact. What do these young people want? It's like, well, maybe they want our taxpayer dollars to not go to fund bombing babies in Gaza as a start. Perhaps that is even more important to them than the theoretical possibility that maybe some of their student debt will be slightly alleviated.
The other funny thing about the Seth Meyers interview, we have this, we can put up there on the screen, is that actually, from Mediaite, please, is that the Monday night interview with the president actually brought in 850,000 average total viewers, but only 181,000 in the 25 to 54 age demographic, which is a 32% drop compared to the exact same day in the last year. Now, maybe that's just because the show has a completely declining viewership. And, you know, again, just the thing, 800,000 is pathetic regardless for network television. But then to think even lower for 180,000 in the key demo, I mean, don't have to say it, but like very, very basic YouTube people can surpass that dramatically with a median video, I would say, as opposed to whatever the hell they're throwing up. But even amongst, you know, going on Seth Meyers, it's like clearly if you think that's the way to reach young people, then you are living in the year like 1992, which, hey, maybe Biden actually is, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe he is.
So, I mean, Seth Meyers himself is 50 years old.
Oh my God. Wow.
I would love to. I mean, I'm sure the average age of his audience is probably like 50s. I mean,
yeah, you could see the
60s.
math.
Yeah, I mean,
if 850,000 people are watching, only 180,000 of them are
in the demo.
25 to 54. Let's assume that the vast majority are not going to be below the K demo, and they're going to be above it. Then the vast majority of people who are watching you are old. It makes sense. I'm actually reading a book right now about the history of late night. It's very interesting. I mean, so much of this happened before I wasn't born. But the wars between Jay Leno and David Letterman. And Letterman at one time, Letterman and Arsenio Hall were considered like for our age, Krystal. People were like, they're young and they're hip and we're staying up late to smoke pot and watch David Letterman at 12:30. And I was like, is this really how people my age lived at that time? Because that is lame as hell. But hey, I mean, in a no cable world news.
Yeah, what else are you gonna do?
I guess what else are you gonna do?
It's like pre-Jon Stewart, even, you know?
I mean, pre-everything. You didn't even have cable television in some cases. This was the very, very early days of all of that. But he seems to think like it's, like I said, literally 1992. That was the case for Letterman. Like, he brings in the youths. They really love David Letterman and his impish style. And, you know, for me, I'm like, Letterman's such a boomer. I can't even imagine watching it. But hey, you know, it works for some people.
Yeah, listen, it was a different moment.
Yeah, it was a different time.
There was fewer options. You had to be there, etc. But yeah, just I mean, I know someone. John Berman is a nice guy, but this is just hilarious to know. What more do they want from Joe Biden anyway? He even went on Seth Meyers and put out a TikTok. Isn't that enough for these young people?
Yes.
Don't think so, guys. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.